to Live Life with Jay. Today we have a special guest today. His name is Justin Pogue from Rental Secrets. Justin, can you share with us today what do you do, who you are?
Absolutely. So my background is in residential property management and development. I've been doing that for 20 years. But most recently, I've taken that experience and I've used it to write a book called Rental Secrets, which teaches renters how landlords think so they can negotiate better when they go to rent a property.
That is amazing. And I know that you told me a little bit when we met at a conference recently. And can you elaborate more how do you negotiate or how do you dig into this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great question because when people finish high school or college, there were no classes on financial literacy, but there were certainly no classes on how do I negotiate with my landlord to keep control of this crazy thing called rent. So people aren't really even aware that they can negotiate, let alone knowing what levers they can pull that the landlord is actually going to respond to. So that's what's actually in the book. And it came about because I was in the bookstore and I was in the real estate section and I'm looking at, and I see books for owners and managers and investors and insurance people and all of these other people in the real estate space, but I didn't see any books for renters. And I thought that was kind of odd because renters actually bring $500 billion with a T to the table every year in terms of rent payments.
Wow.
So it became really important to actually get those concepts out there, and so people can actually learn the levers that they have to negotiate. But absolutely, this is very possible. And the real simple example is, let's say you're renting a single family house and there's a lawn out front. Normally the landlord would hire somebody to mow the lawn. That's going to cost them $50-$60 a month. If you mow the lawn, now your rent can be $50-$60 lower because that's what you're saving the landlord in terms of landscaping costs.
Okay.
So that's just one real simple example. And people $50 a month, that's not a big deal. Oh, it absolutely is a huge deal. Because that $50 a month is really $600 for the year because it's written into your lease. So it's on autopilot for that whole year. But that 600, it does add up. I mean, that's grocery money, that's rent, that's grocery money, that's money you can use to pay for your car payment. And also, more importantly, it may be money that you can use to start moving your financial needle, saving for retirement, investing in crypto, whatever it is that your thing is, it can help you reach that goal.
Okay, so it's kind of finding ways that you can help your landlord and then it will decrease your rent at home. So that's
Right.
one way.
Right. So it's you're looking for opportunities to create a win for the landlord and a win for you. And when you're negotiating, if you can create a win for the other person, that's how you get them to buy into your vision.
Okay. That's great. And I noticed that your target market is not only renters, but it's also landlords. So how does that work? Is that a conflict of interest?
It's really interesting because from the landlord's perspective, what they want more than anything is continuity of cash flow. They need their rent to come in on a regular basis because they've got mortgages and employee expenses, and they've got other expenses that they're trying to handle too. There's this great story that Robert Kiyosaki tells about the first property that his wife bought. And she had rented it out. I forget what the actual monthly rent was, but she wanted to raise the rent $25. And what ended up happening is her tenant moved out, and it took her 3 or 4 months to find a new tenant. Well, each of those months that passed when it was vacant, she lost not just the $25, she lost the full rent amount for each of those months. Let's say the rent was $500. She's losing $500 each month, which ended up being $1,500 over an attempt to increase the rent by $25. So she lost way more by trying to get that little increase than if she had just kept the quality tenant that she had in place already and kept the cash flow going. So continuity of cash flow from the landlord's perspective is what's most important. And what a lot of landlords don't realize is your tenant is in charge of whether that cash flow continues or not. They decide if they're going to stay or move out. And then there's a whole series of expenses that you as a landlord have to take on once they make the decision to move out. It's not just the vacancy. It's cleaning, it's repairs, it's painting, it's the cost to find a new tenant, because those websites that post your ads and all of that and help you find tenants, they get paid as well. Not to mention your leasing agent or property manager also gets paid. So there's a whole slew of expenses attached to replacing that tenant. So it makes a lot of sense to retain that tenant if you can at all, because who wants to pay expenses that they don't have to pay?
Right. Okay. So that does definitely make sense. They're losing out on so much money when they're increased, and that happens very often, especially now after the pandemic. Like everything is going higher. What advice would you give to actually during this time to renters, in terms of negotiating during this season?
Well, the first thing is understand that yes, while you are competing for that property or that apartment against other renters, landlords are also competing for you. They're competing for people who have quality jobs. They're competing for people who have decent credit scores. They're competing for people who know how to get along well and play well with others. So there is a serious competition going on for you, the renter, as well. I mean, those people that you see at intersections waving the now leasing signs, they're not there for free. It costs thousands of dollars a month to keep those people on those corners, to attract that attention. So they are really spending big dollars to attract you, the renter. So the first tip is don't underestimate what you're bringing to the table, because you're bringing something very valuable to the table that landlords need and want. The second thing is be very clear on what you want in the property that you're going to look at. A lot of these properties have all these amenities, all these bells and whistles and all of that. Do you really need that? Because whether you use it or not, you're paying for it. It's built into your rent. So there's this thing in the industry called amenity-based pricing. So every amenity that they add to the property is adding another little chunk to the rent payment that they're going to be asking you for.
Okay.
So if you're not going to use the on-site gym, don't bother looking at communities that have gyms. If you're not going to swim in the swimming pool often, don't bother looking for a community that has a swimming pool. So that way you can carve those costs out of the rent that you're going to end up paying. Thirdly, what's important is look for opportunities and deals, because I mentioned that landlords are competing against each other. So sometimes there may be opportunities where they're offering a discount in rent because there's a new building in the area that they're competing against. Or they may offer the opportunity to put down a lower security deposit. Or in some cases, they may even offer free rent for a certain period of weeks or months, depending on what their competitive situation is. And then lastly, I suggest when you go on a tour, even if you see something that you don't quite like, finish the tour anyway. And I say that because if you see something that you don't like, it's probably something that other people have noticed on that property. And it may be an indication that the landlord is having trouble renting that particular unit. And it may be something that can be fixed. But if you don't ask, you don't know. So those are definitely some tips that people need to take with them when they go and look at a property. And I'll give you one more tip. When you call and you're talking to the leasing agent, just tell them specifically what you want. Don't let them lead you down a path of asking you questions about, do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want the other? Because what they're doing when you answer those questions is they're crossing off apartments that are available in their community. Okay. You answer the question, they're crossing off what doesn't fit your answer. Well, here's the problem. I don't know what the trade-off was. you say, okay, there's 3 floors in our property. Which floors are you interested in? Well, if I say the second floor, then they've crossed off all the third floor properties that were available. Well, those
Right.
third floor apartments might have been $200 or $300 cheaper because they're on the third floor, but I don't get to make that decision because the property manager's already crossed that off the list for me. So I don't know what trade-off I would have been making. So it's important to keep your options as open as possible when you're having those conversations.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So making sure like if they are meeting with someone, keep it more open in general
Right.
before making any final decisions.
Yeah, and be really clear on what your absolute needs are.
Okay.
If you absolutely can't be on the third floor, then by all means, if it's not going to work for you, it's not going to work for you. But
Okay.
if not being on the third floor is a preference, then don't state that as a must-have. Leave that open. Leave be as flexible as possible, because that means you'll have the opportunity to look at the largest percentage of what's currently available to see if it actually fits your needs.
Okay. Now, is it more difficult to negotiate when it's just like kind of like a rental house versus being in like a complex?
Ah, this is a great question. So usually the way the question gets phrased is, if I'm dealing with a smaller landlord, is it easier to deal with them versus like this huge mega corporation who's out there for the dollar and is greedy and all of this stuff? Um, so the answer is, when you're negotiating with them, you have to treat them a little bit differently, but they're under the same pressures. They still have mortgages. They still got investors that they have to pay back. They've still got these pressures going on, whether they're a smaller landlord or a larger one. Um, it's just, if you're a smaller landlord, you are the shareholder as opposed to having outside shareholders, but the pressure is still there. Um, so it's a difference in how you approach them. For the large corporations, the person who you're meeting with in the office, that person has the least power in the power structure of that organization. So it's not so much convincing that person of your case.
Mm-hmm.
What you're doing is you're giving that person a case that they can take to their manager. So that's why going in and whining and crying isn't very effective. But going in and saying, these are the needs that I have, these are the communities that I've found that will fit my needs, whether they're this side of town, that side of town, wherever,
Mm-hmm.
and presenting those options to them and saying, these are the real world options that I have. Now, this person could take that case to their manager and say, well, this person has options that range from $100 below what we're asking them to pay to $300 below what we're asking them to pay. Where can we meet them in the middle? Because this is a really good tenant, because they've paid their rent on time, they have a great credit score, they have decent income. We haven't had any complaints in the year that they've been here. Now that person is able to make that case to their manager, and that manager is able to make a decision about, are we going to offer this person a discount? What type of discount are we going to offer this person from what we're asking?
Right.
And then that will flow back down the chain to the person in the office, and then you'll have that conversation with that person. Whereas if you're dealing with someone who is the actual owner of the property,
Mm-hmm.
you're talking to that person directly. You still want to make your case, but there's fewer steps involved, because you're dealing with the person who's actually owning the property.
Can you share with us like a rental secret with someone maybe living like more, I guess, urban area, like a row home, and something that they would be able to do?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a massive trend going on right now, which is called co-living, where people are actually living together. With 3 or 4 people who have jobs and independently of each other will live together in a house,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll rent it together. Um, it is a fantastic strategy for keeping rent costs down in an urban area that's close to nightlife and shopping and restaurants and all the great
Right.
things about being in an urban area. Um, And it also provides opportunities for networking with like-minded peers, whether it be social, just networking on a social level, or networking on a professional level. One of the properties that I manage has four guys living in it, all young professionals. One guy was actually in a job that he really didn't like and he wanted to get out of it. There was a person who moved into one of the rooms. They had a conversation, and 2 months later, he has a new job, and he's much happier with the direction that his work life is taking. And that would not have been possible if he had not been connected to the network of people living in that house. So there's a lot of benefits to living in a co-living situation. The key is the quality of people that you're living with. And choosing and making sure that the people that are living in the house are the right people, which gets back to tenant screening and those kinds of things. And actually, this particular property, the tenants actually have some say in whether this new prospect actually moves in or not. So that's definitely one strategy for keeping cost of living down. Another great strategy is stop thinking about the landlord as your enemy, and that opens up the possibility of potentially working for the landlord. There are a lot of smaller apartment buildings where, and by smaller, I mean 20, 25 units, 30 units, something like that, where a landlord could use someone who lives on site just to keep an eye on things, maybe let some vendors in, be the first point of contact for their neighbors if they have some kind of maintenance issue, those kinds of things. And in fulfilling that, and in compensation for fulfilling that role, your rent may be reduced by anywhere from 50 to 100% for taking on that role. And many times it is a part-time job. So you can have a full-time job, and this could be your side gig.
Right.
And if you break that down a little further, let's say rent in your area is $1,500, let's just say, a month, which is 18 grand a year. That's 18 grand after taxes have been taken out. So if you gross it up to what it would be pre-tax, talking like maybe 20, 25 grand as a side gig. That's a pretty decent side gig.
That is a great idea.
Yeah.
So these are great strategies for people now, and this is things that are all in your book.
Yeah, these are things that I talk about in Rental Secrets. And the book really talks, and there's other tips and tricks that are in the book as well. So the book really talks about 10 sources of power that renters have when negotiating with landlords. Because what happens is you graduate from school, you're thrust into this residential rental market. You have no idea how it works. You have no idea what even the language that landlords are using. And you end up having to learn by trial and error, which is like the worst way to learn anything. So with this book at your side, like, you really are learning from people who have experience in the industry, and are really giving you strategies and tips that you can put to use today without having to have all of this experience already.
And if I'm being honest, like, I've never even would have thought of any of these things. I've never personally rented. And there's nothing wrong with it. I know there's like a stigma of renting versus home buying, but there's nothing wrong with renting. Highly recommends it. But even like people I've known, like, they would have known, oh, I can negotiate, what I pay, because they don't normally do it. Normally it's like they're like competing against somebody else instead.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. People have been trained to be consumers. So they walk into the store, they see the product they want on the shelf, they see the price below it, they grab the item, they walk to the cashier, they pay the price. Like, that's what they're trained to do. So this concept of negotiating, in many cases, is foreign to people. But it really does matter, and it can really impact your financial bottom line, because landlords have problems too. They are under pressures. Most people think landlords must be wealthy. They're on their yacht in the Caribbean, sipping Mai Tais, watching the sunset in the background. But that's really not what's going on. Landlords have a lot of pressures and responsibilities that they're dealing with. And if you as a renter can help them handle some of that, they will pay you. People who solve problems get paid. And if you as a renter can help solve some problems for me as the landlord, I will pay you for making my life easier.
That's awesome. It's amazing. Can you tell people where can they find you and your book?
Oh, absolutely. So rentalsecrets.net is our website, and I actually post tips for renters and landlords daily on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and I'm forgetting one, LinkedIn.
And is that at Rental Secrets as well?
Yeah, at Rental Secrets. On LinkedIn, it's under my name, Justin Pogue. And yeah, so there's great tips and lots of free content on my website and on my social media channels as well. And
do you offer, I'm sorry, do you offer like one-on-one services or anything like that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that people have been talking about is, well, that's great that these things are available, but I don't really feel comfortable trying to do it myself. A little guidance would be helpful. So I do offer one-on-one services as well, and they can reach me at justin@rentalsecrets.net to reach out and have those kinds of conversations, and we can certainly set that up.
Okay, that sounds great. I'm gonna make sure I put everything on the screen so you guys will see it. It'll be there below. This was very interesting, and I appreciate you saying yes to coming on here, because I feel like a lot of people who are not ready to buy a home are still in the process of, renting, and if they're struggling with their payments, that they can negotiate. So I really excited. Thank you so much, Justin. And go check out his book. Go purchase it at rentalsecrets.net. Correct?
Yes.
I got
Yes.
it? Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. It's also available on Amazon too.
On Amazon too. Okay. I'm going to need all those links so I can put those here. Thanks for watching, guys. Hi guys, thank you guys for watching my interview with Justin Pogue. It was great just to learn some things of how to decrease your rent, like how to negotiate with landlords. Who would have thought you can actually do that? Because I didn't, I sure did not. But thank you guys for watching. If you are enjoying the content, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment below if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.